Name and where you were born and approximate age if you would care to.
And your relationship to Cobb Island.
To Cobb Island.
Cobb's Island.
Cobb's Island.
Cobb's Island.
I'm not going to tell you my age,
All right.
so don't make me tell a story on the documentary.
Just give us
I'm
your
old
name.
enough.
Okay, just give your name if you would to the camera. We use that as a...
Do I want to do that now?
Yeah, it's just so we have it at the beginning. So
Oh, my name is Amine Cosby Kellam, and I'm a native of the Eastern Shore, and I've lived here all of my life except for college.
What is your connection with Cobb's Island?
Well, my grandfather was born on the island. He was the grandson of Nathan, the founder of the island and the owner of the island. My grandfather was the son of Albert, Nathan's youngest son, who was only 2 years old when they came to Virginia.
Where did they come from?
They came from eastern Massachusetts. The reason they came is that, well, Nathan was in the shipbuilding business, and his son, Scotter, and Nathan and Elkanah were in the business with their father. And Nathan's wife, Nancy Doan, was diagnosed with tuberculosis. And in those days, not much was known about any cure for anything. Of course, this was 1833 when Nathan was 35 years old. And he was advised by his doctor to come south, and that's the only thing they knew that would improve Nancy's health. So Nathan bought a schooner and took his time putting lumber and food and everything they had, enough lumber to build a house somewhere, and they headed south. And when they got off the Virginia Capes and were near Oyster, they ran into a terrible storm, and there are a lot of shoals there, and they almost lost their lives and their ship, but they were able to get into Oyster. And the people in Oyster were so kind to them and welcomed them so and made them warm and food and made them so welcome they decided that they would live in Oyster. So that was the beginning of the story.
What do you feel again?
I want you to tell me the story about the huge oyster shells.
Oh, well, these were just some oyster shells after Nathan bought the island, and they moved there 5 years after being in Oyster. This is the kind of bounty that was on the, that they discovered. Wonderful seafood, oysters and clams and fish and everything from the sea. And the size of these oyster shells, it's really immense. I don't know how anybody could handle a few of these on the half shell, but I'm sure they tried and loved it. Anyway, Nathan became bored in Oyster. He set up a little grocery store, but he became very bored. His schooner was in the harbor, and he would look out and see the island that would someday be his. And he wanted to buy that island because there were no life-saving stations. Shipwrecks were very common all along the Virginia coastline, which is very ragged and dangerous at times with shoals. And he just would go over to that island and dream of having it. And one day when he was there, he saw a brown substance coming up from the sand. And upon tasting it, he discovered it was salt. And salt was a very precious commodity. So he went to the mainland and got some pots to boil it, and it was salt. Now he had to have the island. And the island had been a land grant from the provincial governor to Andrew Fabin in the late 1700s. And his heirs were William Fitchett and his wife, and they didn't care a thing about the island. So they were happy to sell it to Nathan for $150. The story has it that he also was required to pay with a wagon load of salt, but that is not in the consideration in the courthouse, naturally. So they disassembled their little home in Oyster that the natives had helped them build, and took everything in the schooner and established their lives in Oyster, on Cobb's Island, and named it as such.
And there were eventually hotels there and so forth?
Well, oh yes, but that didn't happen for a while. The important thing that Nathan wanted at first was to save these ships, and the first one they saved was the Columbia. It was coming from Charleston, South Carolina to Baltimore, loaded with lumber. The captain and his wife were aboard with 6 crew members, and they were all saved. And anyway, the Cobbs didn't charge any money for saving lives, but they'd make a bargain on the cargo, a certain percentage. And that was their business for a while.
So let's deal with the decoys just for a second, and then we'll.
Oh, yeah.
Then
Well,
tell me their significance.
Well, as the 3 boys grew up on the island, they not only learned to help with the life-saving with a 5-handed fishing boat from Cape Cod, but they each had a talent in a certain direction. Warren, the oldest one, was capable of doing anything, but especially of making people comfortable. And Nathan loved the hunting. There was much wildfowl everywhere. He was a wonderful shot, and he liked to make decoys and do things like that. Albert was more quiet, and he was the fisherman, and he loved the fishing. But as they matured, Nathan became a very skilled craftsman with the decoys, but that came a little bit later. First of all, when the wildfowl was so abundant, they decided that maybe they could sell these to some market up north, and indeed they did. They shot an average of 150 birds a day. They were cleaned at night by the family. The next morning, someone would run out and catch a boat going to Baltimore, Philadelphia, and sell the ducks cleaned and ready for the table and be ready to cook. And this is where everything took a different turn. The people who ate the ducks had never tasted anything in their lives this good. They wanted to know where the ducks came from, if they could go and shoot some ducks. And this is how it started. First, a few hunters came, and they had such a marvelous time. Soon they were overcome with people that wanted to come and visit the island and go hunting. That's when Nathan decided he needed a hotel. And they built a hotel that could accommodate 100 people at a time. That wasn't enough. They had to hire more domestic help. They built other cottages to rent to people, sold some lots to Richmonders and Baltimoreans. And the man who came in the winter said, "I bet it's nice here in the summer. Could we bring our wives and the children sometime to enjoy this place this summer, that wonderful beach?" "Why, certainly," said Nathan. So he was in the hotel business all year round, They had to buy property in Oyster for the livestock and the meat they were going to serve, pigs and cattle and so forth. They had their own mill called Cobb's Mill. That's what Oyster was called for a while. And it grew in popularity. They had people from all over the Atlantic seaboard. They had guests from Canada, from England, from France. And one lady, a Mrs. Laird from Washington, came for the summer with her 7 children and 2 domestic helpers to help her with the children, nursemaids. And they had a wonderful time. And a lady from Baltimore wanted the chapel they had built there to have a bell. And she has written several articles about how beautiful it was to see people worship together. Meanwhile, they were salvaging ships. And And Nathan had started to make a lot of decoys. Now his decoys are very much sought after. The Cobb decoys always had their initial on the bottom. This is for Nathan. He was the prolific carver, and his decoys are very expensive now. These are his black ducks. And every one of the boys followed their own talents from now on in. They had a bowling alley. They had an orchestra for dancing. And then Nathan died in 1890. And nothing lasted very long after the old patriarch died. The storm started to come. The people who had owned the cottages moved off in plenty of time. The great storm came in October of 1896, and Nathan and his wife Sally didn't want to leave. They wanted to ride it out. But the Coast Guard had already been there since 1874, and the Coast Guard just insisted that they go, and they made it to the mainland, and everything was gone. The only thing we have left is the surf, the decoys, a few memories, and that's all that's left of the Cobb of that era.
Was there any development later into the 20th century?
Yeah, around the 1930s, a son of Warren's, I believe, because the others, George Cobb, made an attempt to reproduce what had gone on before him, but failed in the attempt. He built a clubhouse, and I don't know if it caught fire, if it washed away. It wasn't ever the same after that.
What did the storm of 33 do to Cobb's Island?
It just further washed it. Whereas you used to, when in the heyday of the island, which was the latter part of the 1800s, they had carriage rides to take the bathers to the ocean to swim. It was quite some distance. And of course, now the life-saving station is under sand, and you can walk it's just a very narrow stretch, little peninsula. An island. It's just a strip of sand that shifts. This one is showing some rod at the bottom. I'll let his top show. We want the end to be plain, clear to see.
What's that piece of leather?
It's what they tied the decoy, anchored the decoy.
What is it made of?
What? Oh, this is the lead. This is what makes it stick to the water. And then they tied something. So they would float.
Let me.
Oh,
Say it again?
Oh.
What's it again?
Yeah, this is a weight that they put on them. And anything else you see is the decoys had to have a rope on it and a weight to keep it from getting away from them. Enough got away from them as it was.
What were they carved out of?
I can't answer that. A lot of them were carved out of something from the ships, like the mesh of the ships. And holly was used for the heads. And just about anything they could find, I think, for the bodies. But the eyes are interesting. The eyes came from Germany. He wanted glass eyes for his decoys. All of them have glass eyes. And that was very unusual. But my grandfather used to have so many of these, I couldn't even get in his car that I didn't sit on one. And now I just have two.
Well, what happened to them all?
People began to appreciate them. And my grandmother gave them away, a lot of them. And others have been, but these are very, very, I don't know how expensive the last one has been, and I'm afraid to say. But the bidding starts at about $12,000. and it can go up. These are not for sale. And Nathan never knew his dacoits would be famous. They didn't know anything would be famous. They were very honest and humble and religious and hardworking people. I'd like to tell you about Nathan's married life,
Okay.
somewhat. Nancy died a year after they moved to the island. And a couple of years later, Nathan married Esther Carpenter. And Esther Carpenter, it was a very good marriage. She was a wonderful woman. She loved the boys. She loved everything they did. And she provided for them bountifully. And they had a marriage that lasted 22 years. And it was a very nice marriage. After Esther died, Nathan married for the third time. He married a Mrs. Nancy Richardson, and she survived him in this marriage. And somebody said, the story has come down from Mackey, who wrote the duck shooting, hunting book that everybody became familiar with in the 50s and 60s, said if Nathan had been around longer than his third wife, he's sure he would have taken a fourth one. But that was the way that was.
What are your personal remembrances of the island growing out there?
Not having any interest in history whatsoever. My grandfather never talked about the island, although we went there in the boat on picnics. We talked about lunch and going in the water over our waist and important things like that. And going in the old abandoned lighthouse. But I wish I'd had the curiosity then that I'd later developed. It would have been very helpful.
So they just sort of took it for granted then, that it was there?
Yeah. And my grandfather inherited, his name was T. Lucius Cobb, and when he married my grandmother, who was Lola Garrett from Bird's Nest, she says, I'm not going to live on that island. So he built her a nice house, and they did farming between Oyster and Sheraton. But my grandfather, when he was older, went fishing every day of his life, even when he was too old to go and too feeble. They had to change him then from the seaside to go fishing to Cherrystone, where some friends could look out the window and see if he was still in the boat or not.
The ocean front was not prime real estate.
And I don't think people, there was the hotel and the food and all the entertainment they had. See, they had a chapel, a billiard room, had an orchestra. I have the harp that the Selzai member of the Italian family with the orchestra had. I gave it to Carplace in memory of my mother. But people would go from the mainland over there for dances and things. I mean, they were really swinging. I know they played poker, I heard that. Yeah, a lot of that. Yeah.
Well, how many people lived on Cobb's Island at the heyday?
Well, 100 wasn't enough for the hotel. They had cottages, one was named Tammany Hall, one was named the Virginia House, and then there was the Merlin House, but there were others. And the lots were about from $500 to $5,000 apiece. And in addition to this hunting thing that they did with what they were able to shoot each day, the ducks sold at these restaurants for 50 cents apiece. But they kept that going too, and they kept up the life-saving. They saw and worked for the need of life-saving stations on the East Coast, and especially the islands here. And it was a wonderful thing. And they've been praised for seeing this need. And together, they had salvaged 37 vessels, and they're all documented. We have all the names of every vessel, and it's pretty interesting.
Did anyone in the 30s, 40s, 50s, been tempted to any development on Cobb Island?
No, nothing was there. It was just a little barren strip of land. The Coast Guard station was rebuilt in 1936. The one that they've moved now to Oyster before something happened to that. So that's a reminder.
It's one of my favorite places in the whole world. That one took me out to Cobb Island.
Oh,
Years and
really?
years ago.
Oh, it's one of Thelma's favorite places.
There is a
And it
special
really was
feeling.
one of mine. But I didn't know what had gone on before my time for picnics and boat rides and swimming. Just didn't talk about it.
Can you talk a little bit about where this interview is being filmed and why we're doing this interview and a little bit about the Barrier Island Center and the Poorhouse Farm?
Oh, it would be my pleasure. Well, Thelma Peterson is our leader, and what a leader she is. I don't think this would ever have happened had Thelma not said, whoa, during her lifetime, I gotta do it now. And I was so happy to be on this board and watch the progress. And the Poorhouse property, which will become a Barrier Island Center, has wonderful possibilities for the future. And I'm looking forward to the future. And sometime when I go hunting for things, you know, that I'll want to give to this place, you know, or things pertaining to island life or boats or something, my children will say to me, Mother, you're just buying everything for the Barrier Island Center. No, we're going to find something appropriate and just, you know, but we're all so interested in it. We're so proud of them, and we have a wonderful board and so
A little
forth.
bit about this building. Could you just give us a little bit about this building?
Well, this building was built in 1840. It was the custom in the earlier 1800s throughout Virginia for the church to take care of its poor. And so it was with Northampton County. And Hungus Parish is the first one to see the need of an almshouse here. But it didn't happen till about 20 years later. And the first almshouse was one before this. Something happened to it, it either burned or something. And there are two almshouses I know of in Virginia still. One is in Shenandoah County and one is in Frederick County, I think. And they're being used for some purpose. But this is wonderful that we obtained this museum, and it belonged to a friend of ours, Dorothy Wise Gibb, who had refused about 20 offers for this property for people who wanted to use it for a motel, or a hotel, for a bed and breakfast. She just said no, 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 no. So when we were eyeing it and she knew that it was going to be a museum type of thing, she said, I'd love to sell it to you, which she did, which was so kind, and it's brought her much joy too, the way it's developing.
It's a great location.
Isn't it ideal? Yes, okay. Well, it was so nice for you all to come over and help us with this.
Oh, we like to.
That's so nice.
Do you have anything along the lines what Ricky was, some of the questions Ricky was asking yesterday? Is there anything that you needed to ask?
Well, one of the questions I like to ask is if you knew much about the women's lives on the islands.
They worked. The women were very, very much, although they had a tremendous, as it developed, they had quite a staff of domestic people. But I imagine Esther Carpenter, along with you see, all the men brought their wives there. When they were married, in turn, they all lived on the island. And somebody had to clean those ducks, 150 a night on an average. And I think they did everything. They worked right along with their men, and that was good.
So so who were the families on the island when they
Well, the Warren and Nathan and Warren and Albert all married, and they brought their wives there. See, my grandfather was the son of Albert, who was only 2 years old when they were almost shipwrecked. And their families were there. Now Nathan, the carver, never had but one son, and his name was Elkanah, and he never married. And my grandfather lost a little son when he was 5 years old, and he had daughters, 2 daughters. So Warren is the only one who had more family.
So it's basically those 2 families and their help
Mm-hmm.
that lived there, and everybody else that was there on vacation?
Oh yes, and the domestics. I don't know how that was managed.
So how many people actually lived there at any given time? How many people actually lived there? Not the people who came in, but...
Well, Nathan and his wife, whichever wife it was, and his 3 sons with their wives, and a few babies that came after that. I have the bed.
And later the life-saving service, which...
Oh yeah, oh, the life-saving service. Yes, I forgot that they had at least 12 of the staff there. And it was interesting how they would, the Cobbs, without the life-saving service, how they would get a ship off the shoals. They had horses over there. They had horses and ropes and hawsers and block and tackle and sail. And the boys were very strong, having learned a lot of things about living in Oyster. And they, sooner than you would think, took their position on the 5-handed boat from Cape Cod fishing business. And that's how they did it.
Can you describe a block and tackle?
I couldn't do it to save my life.
Pulley, isn't it?
Yeah.
Big pulley.
I think so. Yeah, I don't know very much about this.
Do
The
you know?
pulley inside the wooden block.
Oh, yes, and the horse and yeah.
How big was the island? Do you know at that time?
I would have to guess, but I imagine it was at least 5 acres wide. And I do know from authority that where they played croquet in front of the hotel is now part of the main channel where boats chug.
The island's probably like
See
10
that-
miles long.
Yeah, or 17 maybe at first.
Did you say that again?
Maybe it was 17 miles long, I'm not sure, but it was shaped like a key and the outermost of all the Barry Islands, but only 8 miles from Oyster. And I forgot one important thing. There was never any problem for guests to come there. There were special steamers that ran from Baltimore and outside of Philadelphia. One was named the Aeolus, and they would pick up people that wanted to come to the island. Then the boats, everything was done by water and by sail, and the boats would stop at in Terrastone, and they were met by a hack driven by a Mr. Williams and taken to Nottingham's Landing, which is very close to Oyster, and from there they were taken to the island by boat. But in the 1860s, the Cobbs purchased and had built one of the first coal-burning steamers on the seaside, and they named it the NWA Cobb for the 3 boys, Nathan, Warren, and Albert.
Tell them about the hotel in Oyster where people would stay overnight, many times coming in on the train, and would go and spend the night at the hotel in Oyster and then go out to Cobb Island. the
Yeah.
next day.
Yeah, I don't know too much about that, but I do know about the train business. When that came through the shore in 1884, they had a special train stop for people going to Cobb's Island, and they named it Cobb Station. So there's a little town that it later became Chesapeake, when the railroad stopped in the 1950s, stopped doing passenger service, it came there. But now it's changed back again to Cobb Station because it is the main route to where the Coast Guard Station is now on terra firma and Oyster. I don't know much about the accommodations. I knew that there were accommodations there. I don't know much about that. Mm-hmm.
How about the children that were out on the island? What the children would do?
The children, well, they played croquet, and they had billiards, and they had carriage rides, and they had swimming. They never lost a person from swimming at Cobb's Island.
Did they have a school?
The minister, there was a Reverend Sturgis that did some teaching there, but the children were mostly summer vacationers, and they had their own governesses or domestic nurse or whatever. I don't know what.
You mentioned the storm in the 1890s, but what about the 1933 storm? What did that do to Cobb's Island?
Well, see, everything was away, was gone by then. So I guess it washed some more, and my picnic days were over. I had nobody to take, I mean, you know, in fact, I was in college then. And I wasn't even home when that happened. But it just kept, the islands migrate from north to south. And it washes from one place and deposits at another place. And we've learned a great deal about the islands as a result of the storms and as a result of the studies done by the Nature Conservancy. We've learned that they really don't like people. They kind of resent people. After a while, they're going to claim it back where it belonged in the first place.
Seems like the lifestyle on, say, Cobb Island is very different than Cobb's Island. So did the two island people ever?
Oh, yes. Yeah. They were entirely different character. I mean, the islands had, you know, you've heard about the Hog Island stories because you've gotten all those together. And they had enough warning to move the houses off, you see. Cobb's Island, the tides kept encroaching till people were scared. But Nathan and Sally, they said they had to take a rocking chair and all. The water rising all over the place. It must have been a horrible experience.
But on Hogg's Island, the people were very much, you know, there were watermen and gardeners and very much kind of living very simple life. And Cobb's Island seems like a whole different kind of lifestyle.
Yeah, it was the most popular resort on the East Coast. And people came from all over, and they'd come back. And the hunters would come back and bring their families. They weren't transient. Bed and breakfast wouldn't be what they were looking for. They were looking for a summer vacation. And I have magazine articles that talk about some of the very contented clientele that they had there. And one man wrote, he said that Nathan Cobb was untiring in his efforts to please. That he just wanted everybody to enjoy it, and they did.
And what I've read was he was just a marvelous host.
Yeah,
He was the magic of the island.
Yes, and then Warren kind of stepped up and did a lot as Nathan got in his late 80s and didn't do so much.
You talk about it moving from north to south. I was fascinated with the Nature Conservancy in what at Virginia Beach would be beach erosion from
That's right.
storms.
That's right.
Here it is sand migration.
Sand migration, that's what makes them wash, and that's why we have no control over them. And we never will. They just don't like for people to take over. Well, anyway, it was 50 glorious years for the Cobb family, and a half century that no one alive today enjoyed, because it's been over 100 years ago.
I was doing these for a living, I would say that's the quote marks. Beautiful summation.
That was a very good summary.
Was it?
Yes.
I didn't know, I thought it was time for me to shut up, but I didn't know how to do it exactly. But that's the way it was, all
I
right.
wonder if you should just talk a little bit more about this area, like the different buildings on this land.
Hey, let's let Thelma do
No,
that.
this isn't about me. You can, you know, the oldest building
Oh, yeah,
dates
not
back to,
very well.
What were they used for?
Oh, the smaller building, our information has it, was used primarily for blacks. The blacks and the whites were separated at that time, but that may or may not be true. And the oldest building with the brick end, the tiny one, was the kitchen. And this building, of course, we said was 1840. And in the next couple of years, you're not going to believe what's happened to this building. It's going to be so wonderful.
So how did people come here?
Well, we opened for a test run sort of for Garden Week without anything in it, just as you saw it this morning. Barren. And people were curious because a lot of them had never been to a poorhouse. Going to a poorhouse fascinated people, and knowing it was going to be a Barry Island center, you know, it was just an unbelievable thing. And the comments, of course, we had 8 or 9 houses open this year, so there wasn't time for many of the travelers, almost 1,000 of them, to come here. But they had nice attendance from people who were very interested in this building and its future. And so Thelma and the board will always keep the identity of the poorhouse, the almshouse, as it was. By that I mean our address will be the Poorhouse Farm, the Barry Island Center, located at the Poorhouse Farm in Machapungo. And it will kind of do a double duty for history for the school youngsters who, incidentally, in the last 10 or 15 years, have become very interested in digging up the past and in learning about history when they indeed can see history in the making and being restored or brought to life as it would be.
You know, poorhouse was really a part of the language in the 30s and 40s.
Yes, it was.
Because I remember my father saying that I was going to drive him.
4 times, and I still catch myself saying it sometimes.
So did whole families live here at any time, or?
Well, yes, as many as lived in one house. If these were people who were destitute, feeble, old, no place to go, no way to make a livelihood, no field work that they could do. I mean, just destitute people the county took care of. I think that's probably why they had, see, there's 17 acres to this property. And I'm sure they had their wonderful garden and, you know, other things that they could raise. There's evidence of that. So they probably ate well and were kept warm with the local wood stoves burning. And